Guys, it's been a while since I've posted, but I've decided to try once more at this channel. I know it's crunch time for my M21 exam counterparts, so I want to say good luck to y'all who are still going through restrictions and lost preparation time. If any of you or even future IB students who want to do Chinese want some tips, this video will give some general tips about the Chinese XL exams. If you want more specific videos, then check the rest of my channel out, and if you want, a subscription would be much appreciated. Today I want to give some general tips about the external exams that you will face for Chinese and some tips to best prepare for them. So I'm not including the speaking oral, as I suppose M21's already done that. So starting off, we have our first exam, which is our paper 1, which is the writing exam, 作文考试. This will make up 35% of M21 and N21's grade, while if you're May 22 or in the future, it's going to make up 25% of your grade. This exam tests your ability to write a response to a question regarding a certain topic that covers one of the themes of the course. For this new Chinese course, there are 3 questions which are usually of different themes, and but there's not going to be a question for every theme. It's going to be random throughout each exam. So this means that you should have confident knowledge of at least 3, if not all 5 themes. A quick refresher, those themes are 社会组织, social organizations. This stuff includes school life, volunteering, working, and dating. 体验, experiences. These include travel, cultural festivals, and traditions. Science and innovation, 科学与创造. This includes technology, entertainment, science, and how these impact our day-to-day lives. Sharing the planet, 共享地球. These include topics like environmental issues, immigration, and conflict. And then personal identities, 人身份. These include stuff like individual language and culture identity, health, both physical and mental, and personal well-being in general. So some general tips for paper 1 is, this isn't really a tip first, but there are 3 categories of marks, and the whole test is out of 30. There's language, message, and text type. These will be important later on, and I will go into more depth throughout this video. Now, the first actual tip I want to give to all of you is use up the character count. For SL, the minimum character count is 300 characters to 480. Now, even though the IB lets you have that minimum character count, it's not going to be enough to communicate what the IB wants from your response. And you're going to lose marks in your message category, which tests on your knowledge of content in the theme. So I recommend using all 480 characters to say as much as possible. And if you say more, the IB has more to mark, which means you'll have a higher chance of getting better marks. And then planning out your response is also good. I mean, unless you're an improv artist, it's very unlikely you can execute a good response on the spot. You have 1 hour and 15 minutes SL, so I'd recommend using the first 10 minutes to plan out your response before writing the actual thing. And if you want, you can maybe narrow it down to 5 minutes, but I reckon 10 minutes is better. And the third tip is reading the question multiple times. In your planning stage, you need to read the question and then include everything that the question asks. These include the context of the question, so the question says like, you're doing this, or in your town, that kind of things. Who your target audience is. So in the IB, this is usually like young people. What's the issue that the question's proposing? So for example, is social media becoming a big thing? Are people eating more junk food? And what does your persona in the question do? So are you a school reporter? Are you trying to advise people on why you shouldn't be eating fast food? That kind of thing. Writing this down in your planning stage helps ensure that you include everything the question wants answered in not only your plan, but in your proper response, and this will increase your marks, as always. Now, the first category I want to get into out of those 3 mark categories is language. So the language criteria is being able to use Chinese effectively. So these include, on top of just writing characters correctly, these include the use of grammatical structures, various expressions, so such as idioms or things indicating like habit actions, just to make your language more complex and to seem like you got a better grasp of the language itself. Now, in regards to like learning to try and ace this category, exposure to new vocabulary and grammar and then reinforcing those new concepts, such as using flashcards and writing repetition, are probably the best way to do so. This will not only bolster your arsenal of vocabulary for paper 1, but it can also prepare you for paper 2, where you need to recognize certain vocabulary in your reading texts. To aim for the 10 to 12 mark band, which is the highest as it's out of 12, you'll need to demonstrate your vocabulary as well as your knowledge of grammar structures and expressions consistently throughout your response, so not just at the beginning and then more simple at the middle or end. You need to be consistent throughout. Now, in regards like if you guys like worried that you're a bit inconfident about if you're not confident about like say stuffing up a character here or there, the IB is not going to deduce marks if your writing error or mistake doesn't impede your meaning too much, if the marker can still sort of get what you're saying. So you won't have to worry about marks being deducted too much. But if you keep making this mistake, the IB might become a bit more harsh against your response. My personal opinion towards this category is that it can be easy to improve up to like 10 or 11 marks, but I find as a non-native speaker, it's very hard to like get that 12 out of 12, as you just won't have as much knowledge as compared to someone who's doing, say, Chinese HL or accelerated SL. But ideally, 10 or 11 marks for this category is what you should be aiming for. Although don't let that stop you from getting up to 12. So the next category I want to discuss with you guys is message. So this is just a picture of the language criteria. This highest 10 to 12 mark band basically says, including the proper use of like many expressions, effective use of language, and how there's very little mistakes, or if there are any mistakes, it doesn't impede meaning. So next category is message. So message is the criteria that examines how you've answered the question. It's the criteria that marks your knowledge of the theme and topic the question demands of you. The 4 things to look out for when like properly writing your response to include everything the question wants is the context. Who are you? What is going on in the scenario of the question? The issue. What is the main thing you're addressing? Or what is the main problem that you are trying to solve? How does this affect your target audience, for example? And then the target audience, who you're addressing your proposal to, who can get involved. Usually IB Chinese addresses young people, but it can include other demographics as well if it specifies the question. Then the possible solutions. How will you solve or understand the issue? Now, I know that sounds a bit vague, but in order to put these like 4 questions into practice, we can examine a couple questions and pick it apart based on this 4 points checklist. So if I go to the next slide. So for example, view question 1. It says here, you recently had an experience where you felt discriminated against and you want to express your views to others. Write a text in which you explained what had happened, why you felt the treatment you received was wrong, and how you would like to have been treated. So the context here is that you felt discrimination. In your response, you should introduce that context early and maybe specify it a bit more. So for example, I was discriminated against based on my race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever, the rest of your response and what you talk about. The issue here is discrimination, and in your response you should talk about how discrimination itself affects young people's mental health, especially your own, as specifies why you felt what treatment you received was wrong, and how it could affect other aspects of your life, such as studying, social life, and general well-being. Although discrimination does affect everyone, the IB is more concerned with how it affects young people, as it wants to get your own personal engagement. So we are the target audience. In regards to the possible solutions checklist, you need to state suggestions that try to attack against discrimination. So for example, you should say equal treatment for all, and depending on the basis of discrimination, propose strategies. Let's say if you were in this question, it was cultural discrimination, you could suggest that in order to treat each other equally, we need to respect and learn from each other. We all have different stories and identities and cultures. And in order to improve ourselves, we must work and help each other, not bully and discriminate. Something like that. That's what you'd be writing in your response. Now, if I go back, to improve message marks to get to that 10 to 12 mark band, the only thing I can recommend is doing past papers and those questions, and then writing out those responses under exam conditions, which includes a bit of planning in that exam time. This should train you to think and plan your message under pressure, and then getting feedback from your teachers for your practice response. This is important as they can give you a path to work towards in terms of knowing what content you need to revise. But if you're struggling with getting that content down, I have a resource that can list out all the content you might need to say for your writing or even your speaking for the different themes, and I'll link that down in the description. Now, the final criteria is the text type. Now, this is by far the easiest criteria to score full marks in, as it is exclusively testing what text type you use for your response. So the IB's got different text types you use, such as debate, speech, diary, that kind of thing. Some general tips on text types is basically, first you got to choose the right text type based on the question, as in the new IB course, before they used to in the question, they'd explicitly tell you, write a blog or something. But now here, you have to decide which text type you'll need to choose out of these three. If you choose the wrong text type, not only will this affect your text type marks, but because you didn't sort of answer the question accurately, it also affects your message marks as well. And then for Chinese, when you're actually writing out your text type, some general tips include knowing when and where to indent for new paragraphs. Although I know an indentation sounds small, but the IB marks this extremely seriously, and even if you indent by say 1 character instead of 2, the IB can deduct a mark from it, and they can deduct multiple marks for multiple infractions. So, however, they may or may not be as strict as that, but it's probably best to be on the safer side. The formality of your text type also comes into play. So if you're too informal or formal, for that matter, the markers can deduct marks for it. So for example, if you're too informal in your interview or debate, they can, and not say dear schoolmaster or teachers and stuff, they can deduct a mark from that. But if you say too formal and use a formal register and say your diary text type, the IB can also mark you down for that as well. And then the third thing is knowing what vocabulary to use for a text type. So if you do something like say a speech, you'll need to use words like firstly, 首先, 其次, 最后, 和总之, those sort of speech words. And then for debates, they have their own words such as 综上所述. And if you're writing a survey, you'll need to include words like 调查. And using appropriate vocabulary can also come into play under message, text type, as well as, not language, just message and text type. And then if you're confused about like how to deduce the text type, you can follow some deductive questions. So for example, is the question concerned about my opinions and thoughts, and am I reflecting it on myself? If yes, it could be a diary or a G. If it's giving your opinion to a nondescript audience, it could be a 博客, blog, or opinion column. And then another deductive question could be, am I giving advice to a particular person? If yes, it's either a 封信 letter, 电子邮件 email, or 建议书 suggestion letter. Am I taking a yes or no stance on an issue in a class or an activity? If yes, then it's probably a 辩论稿, as IB debates will ask you to either agree or disagree with something. And then if you want, we can do another task which helps us deduce the text types. And if you want a full set of those deductive questions to help you deduce exactly what text type you need, I will be posting that on Reddit soon, along with some other text type stuff. If you want, you can also check out IB Documents notes on Chinese, as they have some good notes on text type. I'll put that link in the description. So if you want to do some text type deduction, go back to this. So let's do question 2, for example. So here we have, the excess consumption of junk food is on the rise in your town, which may have negative effects on residents' health. You'd like to inform the residents about this issue. Write a text in which you explain the problem, how it can be overcome, and why it is important to take action. So here we have the context, as always, excess consumption of junk food is on the rise in your town. And then it's like, and then for text type, it says, you would like to inform the residents about this issue. So here, you're not giving your own opinion, you're trying to inform residents about the issue of junk food. So this sort of takes out the blog option, as blogs more centered around giving your own opinion on a topic. So we're left with a pamphlet and speech. So pamphlet and speech, they're both like sort of things that are informing people. And it says here to write a text in which you explain the problem, how it can be overcome, and why is it important to take action. Now, some of you may be going for a speech, but I'd actually rather go for a pamphlet. Why, may you ask? Well, a speech, you need to address a direct audience. So, for example, you're addressing your school or you're addressing your class. Normally, in a speech, you'd have 尊敬老师 or 尊敬小张老师和同学. But because you're doing a whole town, it's kind of hard to like address the whole town. Like, are you going to address the townsperson, mayor, all the citizens? So I'd rather do a pamphlet because it's because if you think about it, instead of doing like a whole speech to a town, it's much easier to like write a pamphlet and distribute that throughout your local town. So pamphlet is probably the best option for it. So yeah, and I'll do another example, but this time in actual Chinese. So we have the top one, which is 现在网上交友很流行，你们班要根据这个话题进行讨论，你不赞成网上交友? So this basically says, context which is internet friends or making friends online has become very popular now. Your class, according to this topic, want to have a discussion. You don't agree or you don't approve of making friends online. So here you're given your class, it's 你们班, your class has a discussion and you don't approve of online friends. This indicates that you should go for a 辩论 or a debate. Why? Because you're having a discussion activity in your class and the question gives you a clear opinion you need to follow. So it gives you a you don't approve. But in a debate question, you could either have it gives you your stance, so you don't approve or you approve, or it can give you a thing where you can make up your own, whether you approve or not. But if it's got like a clear 你不赞成 and the context is your class is having a discussion, then it's most likely a debate. So for the next question, I'm actually going to let you guys try and decide and put your answers down in the comments below, and then I will be there checking your comments to see if you're correct or not and state the reason why. So this video was initially going to be a part. This was going to cover both exams, but since I'm rambling on for a bit too long, I'm going to split this video into two parts. Part 1, the writing exam, and Part 2, the reading exam. I'll be posting Part 2 very soon, in at least a week, so stay tuned for that. Thanks, guys.